Welcome back to Real Estate 101. Today we're going to continue our discussion on family law and talk a little bit about child support guidelines. And I'm pleased to be joined once again by John Schuman of Devry Smith Frank. John, welcome back to the show.
It's good to be back, Joe.
All right, John. So let's start today off and kind of dive in here into child support. When two people are, I guess, trying to deal with child support and they don't like what the guidelines set out, can they themselves do something differently?
Technically, yes, but in reality, the answer is almost always no. The child support guidelines are mandatory, which means that judges have to order them. So if you go to court to get child support, or if you go to court to change child support, which is something we talked about in an early episode,
right,
then the judge will order the child support guidelines. If you have an agreement for child support that is different from the child support guidelines, a judge will think nothing of changing that agreement unless the agreement actually benefits the child more than the child support guidelines. So the agreement has to pay more for the child than the child support guidelines would otherwise require. Other than that, the judge is not going to enforce the agreement. So that means that as soon as a parent says, I don't like this agreement anymore, it's out the window, you have nothing to rely on. And when that happens, a judge may be so upset about the agreement, they can even order back child support. So if you thought you were getting a deal, the judge may order you pay all that money back that you got the deal on, and you have a lot of money you owe to the other spouse that you thought you would never have to owe.
Okay, so what about parents who don't want to share income from a second job or overtime because they think it's fun money, or even if they, for whatever reason, they don't agree with the amount that the court has determined they have to pay because they think it's too high? Is there anything they can do?
So an agreement that it requires parents to pay less than the child support guidelines are not legal. So if either parent decides to go to court, the judge is going to throw out that agreement right away without even thinking about it.
Even if it was agreed in good faith?
Even if it was agreed about in good faith, because the child support guidelines are mandatory for judges. And the federal government put a lot of thought into them and how much a together family would spend on their kids. So if you and your spouse were still together and you were spending money on your kids like a normal family would, then the amount of child support is how much the support paying spouse would spend on their kids if they were together. Right. And that's based on a number of factors. I mean, it changes from province to province, it changes on your income level, but it's based on what you would probably be paying for your kids, up until $150,000. $150,000, judges have a bit more discretion about it because the amount you pay for your kids may be less or it may be not. The judges will then look at what people in that income range have actually been paying for their kids. But even then, most parents who even make that more money spend more money on their kids. So getting away from the child support guidelines is very difficult, and judges are almost never going to do it and never going to respect agreement that does it, that requires someone to pay less than child support guidelines.
Okay, so how about in a situation where one parent decides maybe that they'll leave the other ex-spouse with the home in exchange for lower child support payments? Is that possible?
That is a really good deal if you're the recipient parent, the one who's getting support, and a really terrible deal if you're the one who gave up the home. And the reason is that's a kind of lump sum child support, and you will almost find no family lawyer who will ever recommend a lump sum child support payment to the person who's paying support. We never do it. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of cases where someone has given up a house or made a big payment to the other spouse, and the other spouse has blown the money, or they've gone bankrupt, or they've run into financial difficulties, and all of a sudden they have no money left, and they say, I don't have enough money for the kids. And when that happens, the court looks at it, oh, look at you, support payer, you still make, $100,000 a year. That kid should be living like you're making $100,000 a year.
Really?
So you're going to pay as if you're earning $100,000 a year, regardless of the fact you
gave up the home
and made that money before. It's amazing how quickly judges forget that when they see a kid who has needs not being met. So there's a lot of things you can do with child support, but if you're the one who's paying support, you're never going to get a lawyer to say you should pay lump sum child support. It's just too dangerous for you down the road.
All right. So in a previous episode, you touched on financial disclosure. They have to do it yearly. Can they opt out of that?
You can technically opt out of financial disclosure yearly, although the Supreme Court has made it pretty clear that if you're hiding an increase in income, then that's a a bad thing to do, and that that's a basis on which a judge can order support backwards retroactively and increase support retroactively, so you end up owing a whole ton of support you didn't think you would owe. But there are some situations where it makes sense to say we're not going to look at support every year, or we're going to fix support to give some stability to the family for a while. And as long as one spouse is not doing that to hide income, then the agreement may stand up. But those sorts of agreements are a lot harder to justify now that the Ontario government has this new child support calculation service that adjusts support using, you do it online rather than going to court. And that works for spouses who are employed, earning a salary, or have T4 income that's less than $150,000, and there's no shared parenting, and there's no undue hardship claims. When that happens, you can actually now go onto the web, and you and your spouse can agree to have to adjust support that way, and the government gets your tax returns from the federal government, and they just do the support automatically. So that makes it hard to say that there's going to be a big fight. But if you have like a difficult support scenario, where you're not going to be able to use the online service, and our support's going to go up and down, and the kid's not going to have any predictability, or it's going to result in fights, or the amount of money you're going to spend dealing with support is going to be more than you're ever going to get. So, if you're going to go up support like $1,000 a year, and you're going to spend $6,000 or $7,000 to get the support changed, it makes no sense.
Right.
So often a good family lawyer, and you have to word these very carefully, can put together a restriction on disclosure and say that it doesn't have to be exchanged except under circumstances where someone's income has gone up or down dramatically.
All right. So you touched on shared custody as well. Is that a situation that can get you out of the guidelines?
So shared custody, the guidelines work a little bit differently. And the way you start is that you actually do kind of strictly apply the guidelines, but it's a little bit different. So shared custody is a situation where the parents live almost equal time with both parents, or equal time with both parents. And in that situation, the way you calculate support to start off is you have both parents paying support to the other parent based on the guidelines. And you set it off so that only the payer with the higher income pays any support, but pays a much less amount. So that's the way you start off.
All right.
But in situations, that doesn't always work out best for the kids. And there can be a situation where, even though there's shared custody, one parent's paying all the bills for the kids, buying them all their clothes, buying all their birthday presents, paying for their extracurricular activities. And judges really don't like to see that happen and won't set off support in that situation. So if that set off in support does not result in the parents sharing their kids, all the expenses relating to the kids in proportion to their income, the judge is going to change the support away from that guidelines approach of both paying to each other, and they're going to change it more towards a situation where the parents look at the total cost of raising the kids, and it's shared in proportion to your income. So if kids cost $30,000 a year to raise, and one spouse makes $70,000, the other makes $30,000, you're going to end up splitting it like you have one parent paying $20,000, the expenses $1,000 paying $10,000, and it works out however the expense is going to work out, or the payment's going to work out monthly.
So is it possible to agree to something different than the guidelines?
Is it possible? Yeah, it is possible to go different from the guidelines, as long as what you're doing benefits the children more. So
not less.
Not less than the guidelines.
Right.
And so there are some situations where that can actually happen, right? Some people like to arrange their affairs differently. So, and when there's kids have big expenses, like, rep hockey or private schools or there's other large medical needs or something along those lines, sometimes the parents will agree that, look, one parent will pay the big expense and the other parent will take less monthly support. And as long as the net effect of that is that the child is not coming out behind in terms of how much money is being devoted to him or her, then the court's fine with that. But you have to have it being child receiving at least as much support as they would under the guidelines.
Okay, so can one parent go to court to get reduced support because they feel maybe that the other parent isn't spending the support appropriately?
Yeah, absolutely not. It's up to the parent who's looking after the kids to decide how the money is going to be spent and how the family's going to spend the money. And those questions often arise. I mean, not always the case, but often arise where one parent is still trying to control the other parent and how they live their life after separation. At least that's how judges perceive it. And so that's never going to happen. Judges are going to say that you're going to pay support pursuant to the guidelines, and it's up to the recipient parent to decide how it's spent and to spend it appropriately. And if a parent's not spending the money appropriately, is not providing for the kids, the kids are going without, even though they're receiving the correct amount of support, then that's a custody issue or a parenting issue. It's not a child support issue. And that's a situation where you might raise a custody concern rather than a child support issue.
Okay, so on the custody issue, can a parent, to avoid paying support, can they give up child custody in exchange?
That's another thing that judges really hate seeing, because there's a few principles, the basic principles with regards to comes to children and family law. One is the maximum contact principle, and the idea is that children really do benefit from having a relationship with both their parents, or at least knowing who both their parents are. So a parent who walks away to not have to pay support is really doing their child a disservice. I mean, there's situations where the parent is completely psychotic or has mental health issues or is really a dangerous person, in which case maybe it's not good for the kid to see them. But in most situations, even where a parent is not a nice person, it's better for the kid to know them. So that's not a situation where judge is going to want to say, do that trade-off. The judge is going to want the kids to know their parents. It's important to their psychological well-being to know where they're from. And on the child support side, child support is the right of the child, not the right of the parents. And so the parents should not be giving it up. So a judge is going to want a parent to pay child support and the child to have the benefit of that other parent's income. So that's not something a judge is going to want to see happen. He's not going to want to let a parent off the hook and never see their kid again in exchange for not paying support. That breaks both those sort of fundamental family law principles.
Okay, so for people that maybe are not familiar with the child support guidelines, is there somewhere they can go online to look it up, or?
Yeah, so the child support guidelines, there are online. So the federal government has a child support calculator right on their website. And if you divorce, or if you Google child support calculator, the federal guidelines come up, and so can the provincial guidelines. The province have a calculator as well. There's also a number of online services that do online support calculations. You have to make sure you're using one, if you're in Ontario, that you use one from Ontario, because the guidelines vary from province to province in terms of the amount. But they will give you the base amount. In terms of figuring out the Section 7 amount, that's a little bit more complicated, but I think we talked about that in an early episode as well.
All right, John. So for people that need your help, how can they get in touch?
They can call me at 416-446-5080. They can go to our website, which is www.devrylaw.ca. They can go to my Facebook page, which is a lot of useful articles on family law issues, or they can follow me on Twitter at @SchumanFamLaw.
All right, John, great stuff. Thanks for coming on today's show.
Thanks for having me again, Joe.
So there you have it. If you're looking for a top family lawyer, get in contact with John Schuman of Devry Smith Frank. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, like, comment, and share our videos. I'm Joe. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.